In the days of Jesus, a wedding would probably be celebrated on a Tuesday, and the celebration would last for a week. And so it makes sense that when we hear the story of the first sign, the first miracle in John, that would be to change water into wine because they had drunk all the wine. However, the celebration continued, and so it does, and so it happens. Jesus speaks these words to John because he is the bridegroom. And as long as the bridegroom is at the celebration with his bride, the celebration goes on. And so therefore, it would make no sense at all to fast at a wedding banquet. And while Jesus is with his disciples, the bridegroom of what would become the church, it makes no sense to fast. And yet Jesus reminds John's disciples, as he is reminding the disciples as well, his own disciples, that there will come a time when the bridegroom is gone, when Jesus is taken away. And we are entering into that time now, preparing ourselves for the moment when we remember the crucifixion. But we also remember the return of the bridegroom. In fact, the bridegroom has never departed from us. And so we might ask, why should we be fasting? The bridegroom is here in the Word and Eucharist. And yet it is we who need the fast. It is we who need to come apart to remember our humanity, to remember our faults and our failures, our weaknesses, as it were. And the first reading is a great reminder of that, because we hear in the prophet Isaiah how the people thought, because they were the people of God, that they could do whatever they wanted. And the Lord even says they act as if they're a wonderful people, they're great people, and yet we know that they're not like us. Sometimes we act like we're so virtuous and so pious and so important, and we place ourselves before the Word, before Jesus himself. And God tells the people, that's not the fast that I'm looking for, where you give up something, where you fast for yourself, for your own selfish needs, like giving up chocolate to lose weight, or bread to lose weight, or going on a diet during Lent. Lent is not the best time for a diet. It's not the best time to watch what you eat. That should happen every day. I'm speaking to myself, of course. But it is a time of putting things in order and realizing where you need to change. One of my parishioners one day said to me, "Father, I'm giving up coffee for Lent." I said, "Well, is that a good thing?" And the person said, "Well, it makes me miserable." I said, "Why would you do something that makes you miserable?" Because other people are going to be affected in the wrong way, correct? And you've probably met people like that. We all have. Or we may even be that person at times. And so our fast needs to be what we hear, not carrying out our own pursuits, but the things that will affect others well. We need to do things like visiting people who are alone or homeless, being kind to them, not looking at them with disdain, but providing even a smile, if not a sandwich or food, or if they ask for money, to bring them into a Dunkin' Donuts or a Starbucks or a McDonald's and buy them a coffee and a meal. Those are things that, practical things that we can do for those of us who have the means and are out to love people. God says in the first reading to loosen the bonds of those who are oppressed. Do we do that in our hearts at least? If not in actions. As Christians and as Catholics, we need to build bridges, not barriers. All too often society tells us, leaders tell us that we need barriers. We don't. Because when we build barriers, physical barriers, we build them on our hearts also. We need to be open to everyone. We need to be welcoming to everyone, naturally realizing that we need to take care of our own security as well. But how we perceive others affects what we do. God is telling us that we need to change. We need to be different. St. John of God was a perfect example of that. St. John of God died on the same day that he was born. He was born March 8th, 1495. He died March 8th, 1550. He was born in Portugal, a wonderful place. If you've never been, look it up. He died in Granada because he was captured as a child. His mother was so distraught she died. His father, because of the death of his wife and the loss of his son, entered the Franciscans. And so John was truly an orphan. John became a shepherd and then a soldier. Twice he entered with the military campaigns, but realized that wasn't his life. And so he changed. He was converted. And he decided, with the help of his spiritual director, John of Avila, to do for the poor, for the homeless, for the hungry, for the sick. He started an order which is now called the Order of Hospitallers of St. John of God. It was in a vision that he heard Jesus speak to him. And Jesus called him John of God, giving him that name. He is the patron of charities, of people who are sick, of hospitals and nurses, because he gave of himself. His great line, which all of us need to remember, especially during the Lenten season: all perishes, only good works remain. Tudo perece, só as boas obras permanecem. And so we ask, through his intercession, that we might realize that everything perishes except for our good works. Because what we say and what we do doesn't matter to God unless it comes from inside, because that's what Jesus sees, that's what God sees, and that's what we need to live. And so we ask his intercession as we go forth to continue our celebration of Lent, realizing that our fast must affect us for the good of others and the love of God.